The sun beat down on the valley, turning the air into a shimmering haze. Hidden on the ridges, missile crews waited, crosshairs locked on their prize, an Apache pilot who seemed blissfully unaware she was flying into a trap. Then, just as they prepared to fire, her voice came through the comms, calm, steady, and laughing. In that moment, they realized the worst possible truth: she had been hunting them all along. Before we dive in, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? Now, settle in, because this mission didn't go the way anyone expected. The midday sun hung like molten brass over the mountains, bleaching the rugged ridges into pale shades of gold and tan. Heat shimmered off the ground in wavering mirages, distorting the air and making distances deceptive. In the cockpit of an AH-64 Apache gunship, the air was dry and thin, but the tension felt dense enough to press against the skin. Captain Riley Knox adjusted her helmet, the chin strap snug beneath her jaw, and stared through the canopy at the jagged horizon. The terrain below wasn't forgiving, narrow valleys cut like scars into the earth, ridges bristling with rock outcrops that could hide anything from a sniper to a missile launcher. Beside her, Warrant Officer Sam Torres scanned a digital map on his console. The coordinates glowed bright red in the center of the screen, tagged with a blinking icon: possible enemy convoy, high priority. He zoomed in and studied the topography, his brow furrowed. "Convoy's supposed to be right here," Sam muttered, tapping the screen. Middle of an open stretch. No overhead cover. No tree lines. No way to hide vehicles except behind rock spurs, and there aren't many. "Which is exactly why they want us there," Riley said. Her voice was calm, measured, but her eyes stayed on the distant mountains as if reading something the map couldn't show. The message from base had been short and direct. Recon spotted 8 to 10 vehicles halted in a kill zone. Minimal anti-air. Mission: engage and neutralize. On paper, it was the kind of task they trained for: a clean strike, overwhelming firepower, in and out. But the way the intel came through, the timing, it had Riley's instincts whispering against it. Static crackled briefly in her headset, followed by the crisp voice of Lena, their operations radio operator back at base. "Hammer 2-1, this is Talon. Intel confirms convoy stationary for over an hour. No defensive movement detected. Keep eyes open, this feels off. Over." Riley keyed her mic copy: "Talon. Hammer 2-1 proceeding with caution. Over." The Apache thrummed steadily beneath them, rotor blades cutting the thin air with deep, rhythmic chops. The cockpit smelled faintly of hot electronics and machine oil. Riley's gloved hand rested lightly on the cyclic stick, each small movement translating instantly into the machine's posture. Sam leaned slightly forward, scanning with the Apache's nose-mounted sensors. Heat signatures are tricky from this distance, terrain's reflecting a lot of thermal noise. "I'm not seeing much movement yet." "Let's keep it that way until we know the whole picture," Riley replied. She tilted the Apache's nose downward, coaxing it toward a lower flight path that hugged the ridges. From this position, they could approach the target zone masked by the terrain. The light was brutal. Shadows clung tight to the lee sides of rocks, but everything else was exposed in sharp relief. The mountains didn't just loom, they glared. Lena's voice returned, a touch tighter this time. "Hammer 2-1, be advised, satellite pass shows no dust trails on the convoy approach routes. If they've been there an hour, they should have kicked up something. Just stay sharp." "Roger that, Talon." Riley's gaze flicked to the timer in her HUD. If the vehicles were sitting still without dust plumes or visible sentries, that meant one of two things: mechanical breakdowns, or bait. Sam swiveled the sensors again, his thumb easing over the controls with surgical precision. "I'm picking up possible metal reflections about half a click beyond the convoy marker. Could be junk, could be something else." "Mark it," Riley said. A small tone beeped as Sam set the waypoint. They cruised lower still, the Apache's shadow sliding like a predator across the slopes. The cyclic in Riley's hand felt alive, every subtle push or pull balanced against the machine's natural urge to climb. The closer they got, the more her senses stayed in high alert, not in the noisy, adrenaline-flooded way of rookies, but in the quiet, cold manner of someone whose instincts had been honed by missions that didn't go according to plan. Sam glanced over at her. "You're not buying it, are you?" Riley kept her eyes forward. "Convoys don't park in the open without security unless they've given up on life. Or they want company." Sam gave a short, humorless chuckle. "Guess we're the invited guests." "Guess so." They crested another ridge, rotors chopping the air louder as the valley on the other side opened up. In the glare, shapes began to form, angular outlines in the distance. Could have been trucks. Could have been rocks. Lena's voice broken again. "Hammer 2-1, you are now within 5 clicks of target coordinates. Still no visible movement. Recommend drone sweep, assets inbound in 12 mics." Riley hesitated for half a breath, then keyed back. "Negative on the weight, Talon. We'll get eyes on." "Over." She pushed the cyclic forward, the Apache responding instantly, nose dipping, airspeed climbing. The hum of the engines deepened, vibrating through their boots. The sunlight ahead was blinding, forcing Sam to adjust the glare filter on his helmet visor. "There," he said suddenly. "Contact, possible vehicle silhouettes at 1 o'clock, 2 clicks out." Riley's jaw set. The shapes were there all right, blocky forms that could be trucks. But they were too still, too lined up, too perfect. She throttled back just enough to keep their approach deliberate. If this was a trap, she wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of a rushed target. Above the steady chop of the rotors, the valley seemed unnervingly quiet. No gunfire. No movement. Just heat, light, in that sense, like the air itself was holding its breath. Riley's eyes narrowed behind her visor. "Sam," she said quietly, "keep scanning the ridges. Convoy's not the only thing I want to see." Sam's fingers danced over the controls. "Roger that." The Apache held its steady course toward the kill zone, the sun blazing, the mountains watching like silent sentinels. And deep down, Riley knew, whatever waited ahead, it wasn't going to be what the intel promised. The Apache's rotor thumped in a steady, bone-deep rhythm as it skimmed just above the dry ridgeline, blades carving the air with relentless precision. The midday sun blazed down on the desert, turning every rock and dust trail into a shimmering mirage. Heat haze rippled over the ground, blending earth and sky into a wavering horizon that made distances deceptive. Captain Riley Knox kept one hand firm on the cyclic, the other adjusting the collective and micro-movements. Her eyes flicked from the terrain to the multi-function display, where a shifting sweep of radar and thermal imagery painted a clearer picture than the naked eye could offer. "Dust's heavier on the left," Warrant Officer Sam Torres noted, his voice low but edged with focus. "Wind's pushing south. Crosswind could mess with your stability if we come in too tight." Riley gave a short nod, banking the Apache just enough to ride the edge of the airflow. The helicopter skimmed low over the scrub and jagged rock outcroppings, a calculated approach to mask their profile against the ground. The last thing she wanted was to silhouette herself against the sky. 30 seconds to visual, Sam said, eyes glued to the forward sensors. "Thermals picking up, yeah, vehicle's dead ahead." Riley squinted through the cockpit glass. Even in the glare, the telltale shapes began to resolve, angular outlines of trucks and armored transports. The convoy was exactly where the intel had said it would be, stretched in a neat line across a dusty plateau, boxed in by the natural curve of the mountain pass. No dust trails, no movement, no glint of weapons shifting in readiness. Too perfect. Sam was already working the targeting controls, his hands quick and practiced. The Apache's weapons systems came alive with a muted series of electronic chirps. "Got 'em locked," he announced. "Missiles ready. Just say the word." Riley's hand hovered over the trigger. Her eyes swept the field. Something didn't sit right. "Hold fire." Sam glanced sideways at her. "You kidding? We've got them cold. No return fire, no countermeasures. It's a gift." "Yeah," she murmured, her jaw tightening. "That's what I don't like about it." The rotor wash kicked up small whirlwinds of sand below them. The Apache floated in the air like a predator holding its breath. Then, faint but clear, a burst of static hissed over the comms. Riley frowned, adjusting the frequency. The signal wasn't from Lena at base. This was local. Static, wait for her to get closer. The words came in clipped syllables, wrapped in an accent Riley recognized from intercepted field transmissions. Enemy chatter. Sam's hand froze over the weapons panel. His eyes narrowed. You heard that? Every word, she said. Her voice was calm, but her pulse ticked up a notch. The two of them sat in the cockpit, surrounded by the whir and hum of their own aircraft, but the air between them felt heavier now, charged. Riley's gaze swept the ridgelines. Jagged rocks jutted like the teeth of some ancient predator, shadows deep enough to hide God knew what. They want us in range, she said quietly. Sam adjusted the helmet sight, running the sensors along the edges of the convoy's perimeter. No heat signatures in the rocks, at least not from this distance. Key phrase, Riley replied. She nudged the cyclic, bringing them slightly higher to widen the view without pushing too close. The midday glare was merciless, bouncing off metal and glass, but her gut told her the danger wasn't in plain sight. From the base channel, Lena's voice cut in, steady but with an edge Riley recognized. Knox, Taurus, status? Eyes on convoy, Riley answered. Looks clean, but we're holding position. A pause. Then Lena's tone sharpened. Holding? You have a green light. Copy, but there's chatter on an open band. They're waiting for us to commit. The pause on Lena's end was longer this time. When she came back, her voice was lower. Understood. Proceed with caution. I'll run cross-checks. Sam muttered, feels like they know exactly where we'd be. Riley didn't answer right away. Instead, she let the Apache drift sideways, circling just enough to test the enemy's patience without crossing into what felt like a kill box. The convoy below remained still, too still. Dust from their earlier movement should have settled by now, but there was none clinging to the air. No crew stepping out to check equipment. No shifting loads. It was as though the vehicles were props in a stage play, waiting for their cue. Riley's eyes tracked the rocky slopes again. Nothing on thermal, but her gut kept whispering otherwise. She'd been here before, different desert, different warzone, but the feeling was the same. Sam adjusted zoom on the TADS camera. Still no signs of hidden positions. That's because they're better than average, Riley said. If they've got experienced spotters, they'll keep glass and barrels down until the last second. She could almost feel them watching, somewhere out there, waiting for her to make the wrong move. The Apache's engines purred, rotors slicing the air in lazy arcs, the illusion of calm in a place where calm was a trap. Riley let the silence stretch, knowing impatience was a weapon too. Then, another faint crackle over the open comms. This time, she caught the words more clearly, steady, 2 more seconds. Sam's hand tightened on the controls. That was for us. Riley didn't answer. Her eyes stayed on the horizon, every sense sharpened. The mission hadn't changed, destroy the convoy, but now, the battlefield had a second layer she couldn't ignore. She made a small adjustment, letting the Apache drift backward, still out of their suspected engagement envelope. The radio stayed quiet this time, but the message was already clear. Whatever waited for them wasn't going to show itself until she made the first move. And she wasn't about to give them that satisfaction. The Apache's rotor wash churned the scorching air into a shimmering haze, the rhythmic whump 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 echoing off the barren slopes. The midday sun blazed against the cockpit glass, flooding Riley's helmet visor with a relentless glare. Her hands stayed steady on the cyclic, but her gaze was locked on the ridgelines flanking the narrow pass. They'd crept in low, hugging the terrain until the convoy came into sight, but now, something was changing. Sam's voice cut sharp through the intercom. Riley, we've got Bloom. On his screen, thermal signatures flared bright against the dull backdrop of sand and stone, not from the convoy itself, but higher up. Dozens of shapes. Too many. Riley's jaw clenched. Where? Both ridges. Multiple points. Not vehicles, those are hot tubes. Her gut sank. Missile launchers. And they weren't out in the open. The thermal image wavered as thin camo nets fluttered under rotor wash. She glanced to her left, saw just a faint ripple where the netting blended perfectly with the rock. Then came the shrill, unmistakable beep 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 in her helmet, the Apache's radar warning receiver. They were being painted. Someone's targeting reticle was locked directly on them. They're painting us. Sam barked, his hand hovering near the countermeasure switch. We need to break right, now. Hold, Riley said. Sam stared at her profile in disbelief. Hold? We're lit up like a bonfire. They'll just hold. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, not hesitation, but intent. The crosshairs of danger seemed to tighten around them. The sensors showed at least 3 separate locks now, each one pulsing with lethal precision. Down below, the convoy still hadn't moved. No engine heat. No dust. Just sitting there in the perfect kill zone like an offering on a plate. Then, faint but clear, came a burst of comms chatter in the enemy's language. Riley's mind worked through the words as she caught them. She understood enough to make out a chilling phrase. Wait for her to get closer. Sam heard it too. They're waiting. For you. Why? He stopped mid-sentence. Across the ridgeline to the north, a thin shimmer of heat distortion caught Riley's eye. A launcher tube angled upward. Then another. A ripple of movement under the nets. She could almost picture the crews hunkered down, their fingers resting on the trigger studs. She dipped the nose slightly, coaxing the Apache forward just a hair, rotor wash spilling into the narrow pass. It was deliberate, as if she were drifting into their snare. Sam's tone sharpened. You're inviting them to shoot at us. Looks that way, she replied, voice even. He shook his head. Riley, if they let those birds fly, we won't. The comms crackled again, this time sharper, more urgent. The voice was gravelly, commanding, carrying that clipped authority of someone used to obedience. Now. Fire. Her cockpit speakers carried the translated meaning in her own head as clearly as if the man had spoken English. The ridges erupted with movement. Camouflage nets tore aside. Crewmen swung heavy launchers into full position. On the sensors, Sam's screen flared with white-hot plumes, missile tubes igniting, propellant flaring like miniature suns against the backdrop of rock. The radar warning receiver's steady beeping spiked into a rapid scream. Multiple inbound threats. Sam's hand slammed down toward the flare's control. Here they come. But Riley didn't yank the stick. She didn't twist away. She held the Apache exactly where it was, suspended in the shimmering heat, rotors slicing the air in a steady beat. Her voice in the intercom was calm, unnervingly calm. I see them. The first smoke trails burst from the ridges, spiraling upward before bending toward their position. In the bright sun, they looked almost beautiful, twisting ribbons of white against the hard blue sky. Sam's breathing quickened. Riley. Not yet. He could hear something else in her tone now, not recklessness, but an undercurrent of satisfaction. Like she had been waiting for this moment, playing a game only she knew the rules to. The pass around them roared with the launch of more missiles. The enemy's trap was fully sprung, their confidence thick enough to taste. From the sound of the comms, they were already celebrating the kill they thought was seconds away. And still, she hovered. The lock tone wailed and Sam tore his headset like an angry hornet trapped in a jar, but Captain Riley Knox didn't move a muscle. The Apache hung in the air like it had all the time in the world, rotor wash sending thin plumes of dust swirling into the noon heat. Sam's hands tightened on the weapon controls. Riley, radar's hot, they're ready to launch. This is not the time to play statue. Her eyes, shaded beneath the glare of her visor, tracked the ridgeline above the kill zone. Heat signatures still glowed across her multifunction display, just as they had 30 seconds ago. The trap was set, the prey, supposedly them, was right where the enemy wanted it. And still, Riley didn't blink. Then, she reached for the comm panel. "What are you?" Sam started. The click of her gloved finger flipping the frequency dial was louder to him than the rotor's thrum. The channel switched from secure to open, broadband, unencrypted, anyone within range could hear. And then, in the middle of a high-tension standoff, Riley Knox laughed. Not a nervous chuckle. Not a forced bark. It was low, drawn out, with a cutting edge to it, a sound that slid through the static like a scalpel. It was the kind of laugh that didn't fit the script of a target about to die. Sam blinked, unsure if his brain had finally cooked under the desert sun. "Are you seriously?" "Shoo," Riley said, her tone flat, eyes still scanning. The enemy comm chatter, faint but still bleeding through on the open frequency, stuttered. Voices in the other language trailed off mid-word. The translator software in Sam's earpiece spit out partial phrases. "Did you hear that? Was that her? Who's on this channel?" The ridge seemed to hold its breath. Sam shifted in his seat, adrenaline tangled with disbelief. "Okay, you've got their attention. Can we maybe, I don't know, move?" Riley's thumb hovered over the transmit button. She let the silence stretch just long enough for doubt to start crawling into the enemy's heads. Then she pressed it down. Her voice came through crystal clear, carried on an open frequency like a challenge shouted across a battlefield. "I was wondering when you'd show up." For a second, there was nothing. Then a burst of overlapping voices filled the airwaves, some sharp, others confused, all in their own tongue. "She's on our comms. This is a trick. Stand by, don't." Sam's heart rate spiked. He could practically hear the tension climbing on their side. "You're playing mind games in the middle of a lock-on," he muttered. Riley's lips curved, not quite a smile, more the shadow of one. Her gaze stayed locked on the terrain, reading not just the heat blooms but the little inconsistencies, two clean camo net edges, a faint shimmer of exhaust in the wrong place. Every second she held their attention bought her just a little more data. On the enemy's end, someone must have realized they still had a missile lock. Sam caught the translated command through the static, "Hold your fire." Another voice cut in sharply, "No, launch now." Riley keyed the comm again, her voice slicing through their argument. "If you're going to do it, do it. But I'm telling you," she paused, letting her tone drop into something colder. "You'll regret it." The effect was immediate. The voices on the other side weren't unified anymore. Some barked orders to fire, others shouted warnings. The translator tripped over the chaos, half words, broken syntax. Sam risked a glance at her. "You realize if they do fire, we're in the open sky with nothing but—" "I know," she said. "No panic. No rush. Just certainty." The Apache hovered, dust streaming off its skids. The ridges, the so-called kill zone, seemed frozen in time. Even the midday heat shimmered slower. And then it hit Sam, what Riley was really doing. She wasn't just taunting them, she was making them question the entire setup. She was planting the idea that maybe they weren't the hunters after all. A thin crackle of laughter, this time from an enemy mic, slipped through. It wasn't mocking. It was uneasy. Riley leaned back slightly, letting her voice settle into something conversational, like she was talking to an old acquaintance. "It's a hot day for an ambush. Shame if it all went to waste." Sam almost forgot to breathe. That wasn't just a dig, that was bait. The enemy's comms flared again. "What does she know? Pull back, don't move." Radar still screamed its warning tone in Sam's ears, but he noticed something, those heat signatures on the ridge. They'd shifted. Just a hair. But enough to tell him that at least one of those missile crews was second-guessing their position. Riley saw it too. Her fingers flexed on the cyclic. Still she didn't break her rhythm. The longer she kept them off balance, the greater the chance one of them would make a mistake. Sam swallowed, his voice low. "You're walking a razor here, Captain." She tilted her head slightly toward him, eyes never leaving her displays. "That's where the view's best." The sun blazed overhead, throwing sharp shadows into the pass below. The rotor's thump was the only steady sound in a moment that felt stretched thin enough to snap. And still, Riley's presence filled the open frequency, calm, deliberate, unafraid. Her laugh still lingered in the airwaves, echoing in the enemy's hesitation. The trap was still tight. But now, the ones who'd said it weren't so sure they were the ones in control. The missile lock alarm shrieked in the cockpit, a sound that would make even seasoned pilots tense. Sam's fingers tightened on the weapon controls. "Riley, they're about to." "Hold," she said, her voice a still pond in a hurricane. Through the Apache's canopy, the ridgelines shimmered in the afternoon heat. The camouflaged missile launchers they'd spotted moments ago were adjusting, their launch tubes slowly tilting toward the Apache. Riley's thumb hovered above the countermeasure button but didn't press it. Instead, she let the helicopter hang in the air, blades thumping like a slow, steady heartbeat. In the enemy commander's scope, it must have looked like hesitation, a perfect chance to kill. Sam's mind raced. Any second now, those tubes would flash white with exhaust. Riley. And then it happened. The mountains erupted. But not from the launchers. From behind the ridges, from the blind spot the convoy thought was secure, two more AH-64 Apaches exploded into view, hugging the terrain so low they'd been invisible to radar and sight until now. Their rotors kicked up geysers of dust and rock as they rose sharply, engines roaring like unleashed predators. "Strike 2 and 3, you're late," Riley said over comms, her lips curving into a grin. "Had to make sure they were looking the other way," one pilot replied. Before the enemy could even pivot their launchers, the newcomers fired. Streams of 30mm cannon rounds stitched across the ridges, tearing through camo nets. Hellfire missiles followed, streaking in bright lances that smashed into the concealed positions with concussive booms. Sam's eyes widened. "Holy." "Focus, Sam," Riley said, but even she couldn't hide the satisfaction in her tone. Through the canopy, explosions rolled in sequence along the ridges like a chain of volcanic eruptions. Missile teams were flung into chaos, some scrambling away from burning equipment, others frozen in disbelief. Targets 1 through 6 eliminated, Strike 2 reported. "Still mopping up." Riley didn't waste the opportunity. "Sam, lock on the convoy trucks." "They're ours." Sam's targeting display lit up with the unmistakable shapes of armored transports and fuel carriers. He locked them in sequence, fingers dancing over the controls. "Hellfire's hot. Send them." Four missiles dropped from the Apache's stub wings in a blur, each one streaking toward its mark with surgical precision. Seconds later, the convoy blossomed into fireballs, the shockwaves rippling through the desert air. Black smoke coiled skyward. Sam exhaled, adrenaline still surging. Convoy neutralized. But Riley wasn't done. She swung the Apache toward the remaining ridge positions. Even as Strike 2 and 3 mopped up the stragglers, Riley's chain gun roared to life. The M230 studding bursts chewed through sandbags, shattered optics, and silenced what few weapons dared return fire. "Enemy force combat ineffective," Strike 3 reported. The dust settled, revealing nothing but wreckage, scorched trucks, shattered missile tubes, and scattered debris marking the end of what was supposed to be a perfect ambush. Sam sat back in his seat, pulse finally slowing. "So, this was your plan the whole time?" Riley's grin deepened. "You don't walk into a trap without making sure you've got a bigger one waiting for them." Sam shook his head in disbelief. "And the open frequency laugh?" "That was just to make them nervous," she said. "People make bad decisions when they think they're dealing with someone who's enjoying the fight." As they hovered over the smoldering battlefield, Strike 2's pilot came over comms again. "Riley, you still have the best timing in the business." "Not timing," she replied. "Preparation." Sam glanced out the side window, watching smoke drift over the desert floor. The enemy's precision ambush had lasted less than 3 minutes before collapsing completely. He thought about the opening moments, the hover, the deliberate exposure, the calm laugh over open comms, and realized it had all been theater. Every move had been bait. Riley banked the Apache toward the distant horizon, the desert stretching endlessly ahead. The other two Apaches fell into formation behind them, dark silhouettes cutting across the sunlit dust. "Mission objective complete," Sam said, logging the results into the system. "Not yet," Riley corrected, her tone sharpening. "We have to make sure there's nothing left for them to recover. And that they know exactly who took it away." Her words carried no arrogance, just certainty. They made a slow circuit over the battlefield, scanning for heat signatures or surviving vehicles. Occasionally, Riley would give a short nod, and Sam would fire a burst from the chain gun to finish off a stubborn target. The sky was clear, the ridges quiet. Only the occasional crackle of flames and the hum of rotors filled the air. Sam found himself grinning despite the lingering tension. "You really love this, don't you?" Riley glanced at him. "No. I love winning." The formation began its final pass, the Apaches sweeping low enough to send plumes of dust over the charred remains. Sam watched through the thermal scope, confirming that nothing was moving, no hidden shooters, no fleeing vehicles. Satisfied, Riley pulled them back into a climb, giving the other two Apaches a hand signal to break formation and return to their respective rally points. As the desert stretched out beneath them, Sam realized something else: Riley had never been flustered. Not once. Not when the radar lock hit. Not when the ridges lit up. Not when the enemy fired. It wasn't just confidence. It was control. He understood now why the other pilots talked about her the way they did, not just as a skilled aviator, but as someone who could walk into the jaws of a trap and come out with the teeth in her hands. Strike 2 signed off first, their voice light with satisfaction. "Good hunting out there." Strike 3 followed. "Until next time." The comms went quiet except for the steady thrum of rotors. Riley eased them into a cruising altitude, scanning the horizon as if the desert might still hold one last surprise. Sam looked over at her. "So what now?" She kept her eyes forward. "Now, we make sure they never try it again." The Apache sliced through the empty blue, a lone shadow stretching over the endless sands, the battlefield shrinking behind them, but the echoes of the counterstrike still hanging heavy in the air. The echoes of the last Hellfire strike still rolled through the valley when Riley eased the Apache's nose up, lifting above the smoke-choked air. Below, the convoy was nothing but mangled steel and scattered debris. Fires gnawed at what was left, sending greasy black plumes into the sky. The air was heavy with the smell of burnt fuel and scorched earth. Even at this altitude, it clung to the cockpit like a warning. Sam exhaled slowly, almost in disbelief. "Target area's clear," he said, scanning the monitors. "No more heat signatures." Riley didn't answer right away. She guided the Apache into a slow turn, her eyes tracing the charred remains along the ridge where the missile teams had been hidden. The wreckage there was just as total, their ambush crushed before it could even begin. The second Apache pair, ghosts moments ago, was now fully visible, their rotors chopping the air in tight formation. One of them dipped its nose in a silent acknowledgement before banking away, heading back toward their own sector. Riley returned the gesture with the briefest tilt of her rotor disc. No words needed. As they climbed out of the valley, Lena's voice crackled over comms from the operations channel. "Guess they'll think twice about setting traps like that." Her tone was light, but the satisfaction was unmistakable. Riley's lips curved into a faint smile, the kind you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. "They'll think twice about everything," she replied, her voice calm, almost quiet, but there was steel in it. Sam glanced at her, half smiling himself. He knew better than to push for more conversation. Riley wasn't one to bask in victories. She just moved on to the next fight. The Apaches skimmed over the last ridge, the chaotic valley falling away behind them. Ahead, the open sky stretched wide and clean, painted gold by the sinking sun. In that light, the scars of the battlefield seemed far away, almost unreal. Riley adjusted her course toward base, her hands steady on the controls. Another mission complete. Another day where the trap had been for the hunters, not the hunted. As the wind hissed past the canopy and the rotor's steady thrum filled the silence, she let her smile linger a moment longer, a private acknowledgement that sometimes, the best way to spring a trap is to be the one holding the wire. The base lights glimmered faintly on the horizon, growing brighter with each mile. And Riley Knox flew straight toward them. What did you think of Riley's story? Share your thoughts in the comments, I'd love to hear your take. And if you enjoyed the ride, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this story so more people can join our crew for the next mission.